Mike Edmondson, how are you, sir?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Listen, you are the administrator or director of the...
Administrator, correct?
Okay. Dude, the administrator or director thing always screws me up. So you're the administrator, direct government appointment for the Idaho Office of Species Conservation.
That's correct, yeah.
Okay, so you're responsible for the Delta smelt.
No, not responsible. They're in California, and we don't give them any water.
Look, can I tell you something honestly? When I moved here, and I've said this several times, when I moved here, I understood conservation as like crazy tree hugging wackadoos. And it wasn't until I moved here that I met people that were deeply invested in conservation, but were people first conservation, which is like, look, let's conserve a healthy elk population so we have elk to hunt. Let's conserve fish so we can all experience fish. And yeah, there's preserving species in the abstract, but there's also a very deep rooted belief that, hey, look, like we're on team people and we all want to enjoy these resources, but we all want to enjoy them in different ways. That's the type of conservation I've come to understand. And it sounds like that's really what your office gets after as well.
That's exactly what the legislature intended when they created our office in 2000. Matter of fact, my elevator pitch about my role in our office is literally this. We work to preclude the listing of species. We work to delist species through improving habitat and taking care of whatever needs a species needs while keeping Idaho's economy vibrant. What's the economy about? The economy is about people.
So your office takes a hard look at everything that leads to a certain population or health of a species and then says, all right, look, how can we improve the environment? How can we improve the life and the propagation of the species, but taking Idaho first?
Yeah. So oftentimes we start out with a position that a conservation group,
sure,
just now we're using that word in two ways. All right.
Right.
An environmental group, whatever.
Sure.
They have some concern about the abundance of a species, how many are out there. So they petition the Fish and Wildlife Service, or for historically commercial stocks of fish like salmon and steelhead, it would be NOAA fisheries, right? Okay. And they would go to what we collectively call the services, and they make a listing petition, pardon me. And there's a number of steps.
Okay, hang on. Go back. Okay, so say you have an environmental group, and they're like, hey, I'm worried about salmon and steelhead. And you said they petitioned the NOAA fisheries?
Yeah.
Okay, what does that mean?
Under the Department of Commerce, under NOAA, there is the National Marine Fisheries Service, and they're charged with implementing the Endangered Species Act for stocks that were commercially viable. And so, like out in the ocean, they regulate salmon harvests with the various treaties and commissions and whatnot. Okay. And so, yeah, it's kind of mind-bending to think, well, first of all, we have salmon and steelhead here in Idaho. They swim up to 900 miles, up to over 7,000 feet in elevation. Okay. They're awesome, right?
Sure.
But they're regulated by National Marine Fisheries Service because they're listed under the Endangered Species Act. Everything that's not or wasn't a commercial stock falls under the United States Fish and Wildlife Service. So you get a group, Friends of the Wild Swan or whatever, sure, and they petition, let's just go with terrestrial stuff or a plant. They would go to the Fish and Wildlife Service and say, for these reasons, we think this species needs federal protection. Okay, so let's even step back from that for a second.
And these are non-commercial species, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you said, the wild swan or the barred owl is the perfect example, right?
Sure.
Okay, great. So they go forward and they're like, hey, this non-commercial thing, we need you, the Fish and Wildlife Service, to look at making this an endangered species.
Yeah.
Great, keep going.
Okay, so the state manages fish and wildlife.
Okay.
Up until the point where that ability is taken away by the federal government because of the Endangered Species Act. In a sense, they're saying, okay, state, you didn't manage them. We know better. We're going to take over. That could be one way people see it, right?
Got it.
In the end, once a species is listed, any activity that has any federal nexus, and I'll talk what the nexus is.
Sure.
It could be a permit, a decision, somebody's signature on a permit that allows you to go do something on, say, Forest Service lands.
Great.
Or it could be the expenditure of funds, right? If a species is listed as threatened or endangered, they have to undergo a consultation where they examine the activity and determine if it's going to jeopardize the population. And if it is, that's not always the outcome. It could be does not affect, NA, not affect. It could be likely to adversely affect, not likely to adversely affect, or jeopardy. If a decision's a jeopardy decision, then they would come out with a suite of actions that go along with that activity to ensure that the activity doesn't jeopardize the future of that species in question.
Gotcha.
That's just like weedy.
No. I'm following. So say I'm a lumber guy, right? And I have a permit to extract a certain amount of lumber from a certain stand. Okay.
Yeah.
And then a wildlife advocacy group goes forward and they're like, hey, we have this fungi that grows on this tree. I don't know, a mushroom or, like an owl or a bird or whatever, non-commercially viable, but just like this thing that exists there. Then I, as the lumber guy, even though I have the permit and it's approved to go harvest, then I have to have a consultation. They're like, all right, man, that your actions are going to either have no effect on this fungi or this bird or whatever, or you have all of these unlikely, likely, or definitely you're going to put it in jeopardy. So if you want to do this, you're going to have to abide by all of these different actions if you want to still harvest lumber.
Yeah, close. So before you could get that permit, the federal agency that would give you that permit would have had to do that.
Oh, so the consultation comes first.
It's government to government.
Gotcha.
So it's an action agency versus a regulatory agency.
Gotcha.
So a better example may be, the fungus kind of blew my mind and sent me off in a whole different tangent. But
sorry.
No, that's all good. So it would be more like there are, say, wolverines present on a given national forest, right? And wolverines, I'm going to jump on my soapbox for a second.
Go.
Wolverines, everybody's running around going, oh my God, let's save the wolverine. Let's make it listed. Let's protect it with the Endangered Species Act.
Wait, is this fictitious or is this real?
No, just like what? Red Storm, Red Dawn, Wolverines, right?
Oh my God.
No,
okay, go.
So wolverines were not in the lower 48 states. They were gone by the middle of the last century. And now we've got a couple hundred, maybe 300 to 500. This should be a conservation success story. We've brought them back. Now, what do we really do? Well, they wandered in from Canada. They found the things that they need to perpetuate their life cycle, and their numbers are growing. Matter of fact, the last time this came up, I made it a personal project of mine to sift through the media and look at all these crazy stories about where wolverines are popping up on door cams in Ogden, down in the Columbia River Gorge, in the High Sierra. Come on. I think we're probably just not counting them all. But the point is, to be critical of the numbers, the science behind this, it's about how the different groups are spinning this politically. Should be a success story. We should be patting ourselves on the back. Hey, these numbers are growing. This is a good thing. Instead, different groups out there want to use it as a tool to restrict activities on the landscape that they might not agree with.
Okay.
And you've run into this in a number of areas.
So instead of saying, hey, in 1950, wolverines were all but extinct here. Now we have, let's just go crazy, say we got 1,000.
Sure.
And instead of saying, hey, we've created an environment where we went from roughly 0 to 1,000, no reason to think under maintaining heading, they wouldn't go from 1,000 to 2,000, whatever the numbers are, right? People are now saying, hey, we only have 1,000. And because we have 1,000, that must mean X, Y, and Z. And the X, Y, and Z happen to be the outcomes or the engagements that I want. So I want to control people's behavior or their possibilities of behavior, both industrial, commercial, otherwise, because we only have 1,000 wolverines. Instead of saying that's 1,000 more than we had before.
Yeah. I mean, you could say the same thing about grizzly bears, frankly. We were down to very low numbers at one point. And they were really basically found in some national parks where they couldn't be pursued, right? And their numbers grew and they've grown and they've grown and they've expanded past the parks. And is this a conservation success story? I would say it is. Are we all the way across the finish line? Yeah, we're close. And I think some populations need to be delisted. That's what the state of Idaho is advocating for.
Now, when you're advocating for delisting something, let's take the grizzly bear, right? And I've chatted with a couple people about it before. When you're talking about this, it needs to be understood, like a couple things. First off, there was a premise that if we got to a certain population of grizzly bear in Idaho, then it would no longer needed to be listed as an endangered species. We have far surpassed that number at this point, and it has not been delisted. Am I correct first?
Correct.
Okay. Additionally,
correct as of today.
Correct as of
This
today.
has been,
Sure.
you know, a legal teeter-totter, right? And I would maybe define Idaho a little bit. So when you're making determinations of listings or delistings, they can't take into account political borders.
Sure.
Okay. So say bull trout. Bull trout in the Upper Snake Recovery Unit are doing excellent. And we would like to see that distinct population segment, that's a weedy term with the ESA, we would like to see those fish taken off the endangered species list, right? But across their range, they're not doing well everywhere. Like Eastern Washington, tributaries to the lower Columbia, yeah, they're not doing as well as they are in Idaho. Therefore, they're on the list. And this is a topic in itself, because this applies to most of the listings. When you see a listing and it says the conterminous United States or the lower 48 states, and this is an argument that we've used with bears as well. Bears did not exist in all 50 states. It is the western states, right? And so, you know, that's another thing about bears too. When we think of bears, I mean, aside from Yogi and his picnic basket, most people think about mountains, right?
Sure.
And that's true-ish for black bears especially. Grizzly bears are really plains animals. You know, you go back to even the journals of Lewis and Clark. Where did they have their conflicts? It was down there, right? And you look at the California flag. They got a bear on it. Where were those bears? In the LA basin, in the Central Valley of California? No, bears got pushed to the mountains, right?
Do you recall the film The Revenant?
Oh yeah.
Where Leonardo had to eat the buffalo liver to get the Oscar. He had to do a lot. He had to sleep in a horse, you know. But that was actually written. That was modeled after a true story of an individual who got attacked, I believe, by a grizzly bear, but in the plains. It wasn't in a mountainous area.
Yeah. Well, the mountains make for better film. They're more dramatic. There's
100%.
canyons. You can fall down stuff. Oh yeah.
So tagging on that, the original argument for grizzly bears being listed was a certain population within a certain area, like southeast Idaho. And since then, we surpassed that. But the bears also spread out beyond that range. And those like pilot populations all throughout Idaho, or not all throughout, but throughout Idaho, don't have a huge population. So they're like, hey, wait. The original population, yeah, we hit the numbers, but now there are these little like satellite communities of bears, and they don't have that many bears. So like we can't delist them because then that might affect the satellite population's capacity to grow.
Potentially. So let's make it more specific. All right. Okay. So you said as an example, Southeast Idaho. So let's take the Northern Continental Divide, right? And that would be like your Glacier Park area. Okay. That was a place where bears hung on, right? And then the Greater Yellowstone, right? And that's a place where bears hung on. And a lot of people are focused, especially on Greater Yellowstone, because by any measure, we've surpassed the number of bears for delisting. Going back to bear biology, you know, they're long-lived creatures. They have gigantic home ranges. When juvenile male bears disperse, especially, they got to find a place where there's no other bigger, badder bear so they can get along and perpetuate their life cycle, right? And so they're going to spread out, but they spread out slowly. And unfortunately, outside of the park and outside of the protections of the ESA, well, it doesn't even matter about the ESA at this point. You know, you have roads, you have cars, you have private property, you have, if a bear is like eminently going to harm you or your kid or something like that, everybody's going to make the right decision and try to defend themselves or their child or whatever. Yeah. And so a number of bears get taken out because of those conflicts, right? But they're naturally spreading out. So let's take some other areas. We have most of our bear conflict issues are in Clark and Teton County and Bonner and Boundary County, right up north, and they correspond to the Cabinet Yaks and the Selkirk. Those are mountain ranges, like on each side of the Panhandle, right?
Gotcha.
And those bears, their number isn't a large enough abundance for them to meet that quote delisting target threshold or criteria. Yeah. It's going to take them a while, right? But there's connectivity. They wander around, right? And so we have this big piece in central Idaho that is somewhat controversial right now because there's environmental impact statement being crafted to look at reintroducing bears into the Bitterroot system. Well, I got one question. I mean, why aren't the bears there already? I mean, we've had bears wander through. We have satellite collars, radio collars, and tagged bears. We can see their movements. They move through. Nobody's taken up residence. Why not? You know, we have bears wander by Salmon, Idaho, and back along the Continental Divide. They're bleeding out of these populations that are probably too large for the areas they're confined to. It's like, how many square miles is Yellowstone? I don't quote me. I can't tell you. But if you looked at the home range of a male grizzly bear, is not big enough. And so you have this high concentration of bears. So yes, they're going to bleed out all over the place. And because they're a plains animal, what do they want to do? They want to go to the areas where the living is easy. What kind of living is easy? Orchards, beehives, potato fields.
I heard that recently that they're coming in, that grizzly bears are being focused on a bit for depredation because they're literally eating crops.
Yeah.
That, and like you have wild, not in Idaho, but you have, you know, wild boar problems in other states where they just absolutely decimate crops. And, you know, again, bears being animals that enjoy tubers, it's like, yeah, man, potato fields are easy pickings.
Yeah. There's film. There's film out there circulating on the internet, movies of bears doing just that. Montana's had an issue where some bears got in a cornfield and they just sat there all summer. Why would they go anyplace else?
So just by the nature of the way that the bear lives, we're going to continue to see this push out. And as, you know, kind of like the fingers of population spread out, because that's the way the bears exist. As they spread out, we're always going to have areas where bears are essentially pushing out in smaller numbers, trying to go, you know, find a range that works for them, best suits them. And that's part of what's leading to the problem with the hesitancy of delisting them. They're like, well, yeah, in this original area, they're populated fine, but then we have these like smaller areas and smaller populations, and like, so we can't delist them, at least in part because of that.
Yeah. From a policy standpoint and a legal standpoint, Idaho is taking extreme precaution and measuring our steps carefully so that we don't end up with a small victory, but we lose the war. In other words, if we get Greater Yellowstone delisted, there's a lot of folks that would be happy about that. But if it leaves a remnant population that we can never recover, and that Cabinet Yaak, Selkirk, Northern Idaho Panhandle area ends up with forever ESA protections, that's a problem for the state.
What would cause that? What would cause forever?
Because that area is small and the bear numbers aren't enough, and it would take a long time for them to then have their population grow to that level of abundance so that the Fish and Wildlife Service may be comfortable delisting them. But it's back to a bigger issue that you've talked to with other guests about. It's the equal access to justice and it's not a cottage community anymore of the sue and settle business. And so
for people that aren't familiar with that, explain equal access to justice and the sue and settle.
All right. Well, I'm not a lawyer.
Oh, sure. Makes two of us.
Yeah.
Another thing we share in common.
And my lawyer friends are probably going to make fun of me.
You know what? They probably make fun of you anyway. Don't worry.
They do. So, as I understand it, it was originally intended to give veterans the ability to sue the federal government about their benefits from Veterans Affairs, right? But it wasn't written specifically just for the problem they were trying to solve. And as other legislation was written, such as the Endangered Species Act, they allowed for third-party lawsuits.
So the idea is like, look, we have these veterans, they're due these benefits, they put their life on the line, you know, disabled, whatever it might be, but they don't have the money to go up against the federal government in the legal world. So we are going to make it so that if they are correct and they do in fact have, you know, a grievance against us, then the federal government's going to pay for those legal fees.
Yes.
Hence equal access to justice. So there's a way for then a market of attorneys or legal people to say, all right, well, if this case is good enough, then we know we're going to get our legal fees paid for by the defendant, the federal government, whatever it might be. Yeah, let me get you a little bit more coffee. And therefore, you had a population of people that essentially started looking for cases around this particular thing because they're like, hey, this is a big payout. That also caused the federal government to start looking at this problem as it with all defendants and saying like, all right, look, how much is this going to cost to defend? If we run up the legal bills and we're found, guilty, we don't win this case, we're going to have to pay their legal fees. So then, okay, what's the risk benefit analysis? All right, they're suing us. Why don't we just settle? And that got applied not just to the original intent of veterans, but it started getting applied broadly across different industries, including the environmental industry.
Yes, correct.
That's
Nailed
a lot.
it on the head. And so there's always a motivation for groups out there. I don't want to identify anybody in particular or pick on one or the other, or all of them, to take a poster child animal, something that's cute and furry, charismatic megafauna, fundraise off it, say, oh, these jackbooted thugs are going to stomp them in their dens, send us money, and we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. We're going to sue the federal government, or we're going to sue against a decision to delist said charismatic megafauna, right? And then that goes on. And frankly, the federal government has not been really good at winning these cases. It's about dotting the I's. It's about crossing the T's. It's about having people that can represent them and win arguments. Well, guess what? In your episode with Norm, he talked about a great experience he had in Portland on Salmon Street.
Yes.
Where the best dressed attorney in the nicest car was representing the environmental group. Not Norm. He came in on the red line from PDX.
Right. Norm Smanko. Great episode.
Yeah, that was a good episode.
That guy... There are some times when I talk to people and I realize, like, I always feel like an idiot, but there are times when I realize I'm like, oh, you're really an idiot. Just like sitting like, jeez, man. And he was laser focused. He brought up something that actually has been a point of discussion in multiple episodes. And you being a species conservation guy, help me understand this. There is discussion about the stepping away from grizzly bears. Sure. There's conversation about the lower four Snake River dams, as there always have been. And you have this from an agricultural standpoint with transportation. You have it from a power standpoint. Here's a side note. Did you know one of the arguments to breach the lower four Snake River dams is the argument, and again, it's not inaccurate, that those dams sell power at a loss at certain times of the year because they're run-of-river dams. Okay, so we have a lot of water coming through there in May. We're not using all that power, and we actually sell it at a loss to other areas. I come and you hear that and you're like, oh, that's bad. Why do we do that? I come to find out recently that the entire Western grid connects with each other and they all do this, meaning we all have different power generating mechanisms that at a time we individually sell at a loss to other states. And in fact, Idaho Power is so gangster that they actually get paid to buy megawatt hours from other places when they have a glut of them and they have to go somewhere. So they actually pay Idaho Power. And at times Idaho Power takes the $20 per megawatt, stores it in a battery, and then sells it right back later when they need it. And it's like, wait, you got paid $20 a megawatt to take it, and then you turned around and sold it for like 80 later in the day. They're like, yeah, we did that.
Yeah.
So totally. The point is you have this power. So the argument is, hey, we have to transport agriculture, we have power consumption, we have fish, all these things. But in particular, the argument for the fish, this is a really complex problem because even before the first dam, these fish had been obliterated, all but extinct. And in fact, it's like even before we hit the 1900s, they were like hugely decimated. Accurate?
Accurate.
Help me understand that.
I'm a little bit of a historian. In your episode with Carter, he said he was a biologist and he's become a historian. But with
Carter Niemeyer.
Yes, yeah, Carter Niemeyer. Come on, Wolfer.
Come on. Man.
Yeah, you got to read
that book right there.
Yeah. So, I actually have this with me. A preliminary report upon salmon investigations in Idaho in 1894 by Everman, PhD. He was sent out to Idaho to look at salmon and steelhead populations and where they reproduced and what they needed because these populations have been crashing. So this is one of the earliest fisheries reports that is the foundation of fisheries science in Idaho. The first sentence of his second paragraph of this report, it's a 34-page report. It's nothing you're gonna base any future work on, but it's interesting and it's more than anecdotal. Dr. Everman says the alarming decrease in the salmon catch of the Columbia within recent years, the importance of preventing the continuance of this decrease and the desire and hopes that the salmon industry may be rebuilt to its former importance render, this work necessary. So I think to myself when I read that, this is 1894. I mean, we were in a bad spot before we started. I mean, that's just a decade after statehood?
Yeah, and the emphasis, so that guy's saying the whole reason we have to do this is because we have an alarming drop and the desire to rebuild the salmon industry. And again, before
1894. Yeah.
That's something that it's like, how does that factor in? Because that was something that I was ignorant of before Norman. Then I had Mitch Cutter come in from Idaho Conservation League.
Mm-hmm.
And both of them agreed and really articulated. Mitch in particular was like, no, man. By like 1930, those fish were all but gone. And so it's like, okay, how do we factor that in? Like, how do you compile that and then point directly at the dams and say the dams are the problem? It's like we have more salmon now than before the first dam was built. It's at least that's what I've been told by people.
And there's always nuance to these types of statements. And on the face of it, that is completely accurate. And and I think Mitch made a distinction between wild fish and hatchery fish.
Yes, hatchery fish. That was the big piece he made.
So yeah. When you have all of those numbers combined, then that's a true statement. But wild fish, those numbers are down, and that's really one of the things our office is working on to improve the habitat that those fish rely upon, oftentimes in central Idaho. So the salmon and Clearwater basins. So in these rivers, we want to improve the habitat so that there's more juveniles that go out, therefore more adults come back, even in low numbers. And I don't want to rehash, material you've covered in other episodes.
Sure.
But it's really interesting. How did we get there by 1894? Well, it was the utilization of the resource at the mouth of the Columbia and the main stem Columbia when you had things like fish wheels. Have you ever seen a fish wheel?
Okay, this is essentially like a large water wheel that allows the fish go in and it rotates them up and then drops the fish out on the side, right?
Yeah, it's passive.
Yeah.
The fisherman can just sit there in a lawn chair and eat a sandwich while the pile of fish grows next to him. So you can them and sell them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
I saw that in a documentary once. I thought it was gangster. I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. Yeah, it killed the species. But like, totally got it.
Yeah. But we tend to exploit a resource beyond its capacity, right? And so, we could say the same thing about beaver. And there's a really interesting history with beaver. Beaver are essential to aquatic ecosystems. They make them more resilient. Now, if they're by your culvert or your city water intake, they can be a giant pain in the ass. Living with beaver, the social capacity for beaver is something separate. But I can't think of Ben's last name, but he wrote a book called Eager, really interesting. He has a very good history of the exploitation of beaver. So what was it about them? It was their fur. It can compact into this amazing felt, and they made a lot of fashion with it, hats and whatnot, all over Europe, right? So at first, when the folks in England were coming over, they were just taking some of the beavers. They were trading with native tribes, and they would go get some beavers, right? And they would always leave enough to repopulate. So fast forward a while, when the United States and Great Britain, or England, I got to get my term straight up, which at that time, right? That it became an arms race to settle the Columbia Basin, right? What they called the Oregon Territory was the Columbia Basin. That's what they wanted, that chunk up into Canada and where we sit today. The United States had an inherent advantage because we had overland travel, so you could get in your wagon train, and that was an advantage to us. So what they said was, we're going to depopulate beavers. We're going to have a scorched earth scenario. So their lands aren't arable, and they're not going to want to walk over there, and then we'll get it. So they depopulated the west of beavers, which also may well have something strongly connected to the fact that our salmon numbers were pretty lower than they are now at the turn of the last century, or the century before that. See, human activity is really interesting. No, nobody set out to screw salmon. Nobody set out to get rid of bears. It was all about survival. We have to grow crops, right? We mine here, we have to feed our people. So we're going to put our agriculture next to the river. It makes perfect sense. The water's right there. Floodplains are really fertile because they flood every year. Sediments deposited, you have really rich soils, you grow things. All of these things were done so that we could survive and have an economy. It was never intentional. Hey, let's log every tree. Let's mine every last thing. No, we're trying to get along. And then, yeah, we overdid it in some areas.
When I started, I got my first house and I was very excited about it. And I was like, I want to build garden beds, want to start a garden. Right. And I went out and got some redwood. I was like, I'm going to do these awesome redwoods. And I was pretty young. And a friend of mine was like, wow, man, you did redwood. I was like, yeah, it's going to be awesome. He's like, well, like, don't you feel bad? I'm like, feel bad about what? Right. And thus started my first understanding of like mass depletion of a product. It's like redwood used to be super cheap because, the California redwood was this incredibly abundant species and they were gigantic and they grew. And, then we harvested them all. And I was like, oh, that's terrible. Then I found out about forest stewardship and, that California's actually planting more trees than it harvests every year. It's like, oh, okay, that's good. So it's kind of this balance out of, okay, so it was really bad initially. There's actually, I think in the Bay Area, there's one last tree that got ditched by or dodged the loggers. And I've seen pictures of it. Friends went and found it. And it's like, it's a real hike to get to it. Massive, like this gigantic ancient tree. But the point is you have practices from before that were ill-informed and hasty and also due to survival. Like when you have somebody who's like, listen, if I don't have trees, I can't feed my kids and there's no industry around here besides this. And I'm not about to let my kids starve. Right. So you had people that had to make hard decisions, or it wasn't a hard decision. It was an easy decision, but like it was a tough situation. Right. But the point is you have these kind of vestiges of past industry that people weaponized to prevent contemporary industry where it's like, hey, look, it's not that we can't have redwood. It's that we need to be responsible with redwood harvest. It's that we need to plant redwood trees as we harvest them. And we're cognizant of the impact we have and we, allow the market to adjust accordingly. So we can have the product, but we're just responsible with it. But nobody brings that point up.
No,
right?
No, nor do they want to talk about, industry standards and best management practices and the fact that, like Idaho Department of Lands and its director, Dustin Miller, they do an excellent job. We have things like the Forest Practices Act that dictate what, where, and when, and how, you can operate. And it's to perpetuate those lands, right, for their constitutional purpose. Nobody wants to destroy the land at all. And even generally, I'd say the same thing is true across the board with the cattle industry, with ranching, with producers. They need that land to work for them. And so they're not going to do things that are intentionally harmful. And as we all learn lessons over time, we try to find the best practices, right? How do we get along on the landscape we're at today? And your example with the redwood trees was great. And the whole time my brain is screaming, the same thing happened with big game and waterfowl. As we spread from the East Coast to the West Coast, most of the meat was wild game and there was market hunting and populations were depleted. There's plenty of stories about that. And that happened even in Idaho.
Right. But we have a healthy population of big game.
Yep.
We have healthy populations of waterfowl. People are still harvesting them. We just changed the way we manage this resource.
Absolutely. With buy-in. And that's the thing. You don't tell people what to do. You listen to people and learn what their needs are. And you converse and you collaborate and you figure out how to get to that end goal.
Listen, here's a question for you, and this is a bit of a dark question. Do you think, I have been educated recently on a couple really intense, larger industrial issues, right? Specifically things like mining, right? Like, hey, we don't want mines here, right? There's big conversation about antimony or the stibnite mine, and different mining operations or different resources that Idaho has available for the United States and how important these things are. And I also got educated on the need to reduce the minerals on the critical mineral list, right? 50 critical minerals. Two things that they have to have. They have to have an absolute irreplaceable economic or defense impact on the United States. So like if this is your critical mineral, you can't replace it. You absolutely need this. And it has to not be able to be supplied or processed by the United States right now. So we absolutely need it and we can't get it for ourselves. Idaho has like 10 of those. There are 50 of them and Idaho has 10. The conversation though around mining in Idaho is very dark because of industry standards of the past and poor behavior of the past. And because of that, you have people very justifiably that come forward and say, hey man, this hasn't gone really well in the past. Like we don't want to repeat this. And by the way, I don't want to repeat it. I don't know anybody who wants to repeat, horrible environmental catastrophes or human suffering. But I also don't know anybody who's advocating for zero further usage of these minerals. It's
yeah,
like,
exactly.
Okay, we don't want to mine here because I don't want these bad things to happen. Go ahead and get it from somewhere else that has like child labor and stuff. And let's just keep making the products.
Yeah, pollute someplace else.
Right. So it's kind of like, do you think that the groups that are advocating for that kind of thing are really advocating for the environment, or do you think they're advocating for their own backyard? Because if we're on like Team Earth, you should say, hey, mine everything here. I want you to come to Idaho because Idaho is going to bring the most robust, like comprehensive list of environmental considerations, humanitarian considerations, all of these things, restoration, the whole thing.
Yeah.
And we want you to come here and be as responsible as possible so that you don't have 6-year-olds down in mines. You don't have wide swaths of earth getting absolutely obliterated because we're going to hold you to these standards and it's going to be great for everybody. Like that would seem to be the real environmental position that people should have.
And that is the biggest challenge, is to balance those concerns. And while I'm not going to speak to the motives of groups I'm not a part of, I, like you, observe them from the outside and then have to work to get to an end goal. Okay, maybe it's permitting stibnite. That's
not your decision. It's not my decision. It's neither of us, right?
No, not overall. I mean, stibnite's a really interesting situation, and is born of need and of a monetary interest, right? It was gold. Then, boom, World War II, antimony.
Right.
We need this. We need it now, and we're going to go get it, right? And then, hey, after a while, those companies went away, and a pretty ugly legacy was left. And I think that's where the dark part in the room comes from. The question is, can we do a better job today? How do we move forward to extract the resources that our economy needs and maybe even make the environment a better place, right? And in a situation like stibnite, it's already been worked over so much. What's there to lose? I think there's a lot to gain. If I took the budget afforded to me and the grants our office brings in from the federal government for fish restoration and recovery, and I directed that to the stibnite, to the South Fork of the salmon, the East Fork of the South Fork of the salmon, pardon me, and tried to establish connectivity, I couldn't afford to do it over 20 years. And this project may get us there, should all the permits fall into place and the lawsuits melt away.
And again, I don't know. I've never been there. I'm really hopeful that I get to go see it. But essentially, it's my understanding that the history of the mine, obliterated the area such that there is arsenic, like a ton of arsenic leaking into the waterways every single year. Literally a ton, like 2,000 pounds, a lot of arsenic, right? That hasn't been cleaned up, that the company is starting to clean up. It's also my understanding that there's no fish passage, so they essentially terminated the capacity for the fish to make it upstream, and they're rebuilding that or attempting to rebuild that so fish can get around it. So they're cleaning up the arsenic, they're reestablishing fish passage, and then any future mining would have to be done to today's standards, not the standards of, World War II.
Yeah. Now, today's standards, calls into question a larger discussion that I'm not qualified to have about the Mining Act of 1872 and maybe reforms that Congress could make in the future. But I think when you have a company like Perpetua that they're trying to find a win-win situation. See, for them to rework some of that material, they have to reroute the South Fork of the Salmon, right? So right now, it just kind of terminates in this cliff and pours over into what's called the glory hole, right? And it doesn't look natural, but it's actually kind of pretty when you sit back and just look at the color. And fish find a way, right? There's bull trout in there, and Chinook salmon spawn within 200 feet, maybe right up to the lip of the glory hole in the South Fork of the Salmon. And everyone's right to have some concerns. And when we did the consultation under the Endangered Species Act for salmon and steelhead, we took into those considerations, and they have guidelines that they have mandatory actions they have to take. Like, for example, blasting. They can't blast too close and shake the riverbed and strip all the eggs and all that stuff. But they have to reroute the East Fork of the South Fork around their area, and they're proposing a tunnel. And in this tunnel, and miners are very good at digging tunnels. Fish biologists are not. And so they proposed as part of the project, well, we're going to provide passage, right, for fish. So inside the tunnel, they've proposed to, at quite an expense, to make it a giant fish ladder that can also accommodate everything else that goes down a river. Ice in the winter, wood at high water. Juveniles could always go down. And then there's been a lot of thought about how to get adults up. And what if they don't want to go up? Then what do? Well, we'll trap them and haul them up. But we're going to put them up there above that site. And that's what I was saying. You know, if we took our budget for fish habitat restoration and concentrated it all on that one project, we couldn't get there. But I think we're going to get there.
You know, you're, again, the administrator of the Office of Species Conservation. It's wild to, this is kind of the juxtaposition that I was saying. I understood conservation as like, oh, just whatever. But you're, again, somebody charged with preserving species and conserving them, and also recognizing that industry might have a place here. You know what I found interesting about this broader conversation? Yeah. People object to it and they say, hey, look, the company wants to make money. That's all they want to do. And you know what? I have yet to understand a mining company, be it in the United States or elsewhere, that's not doing something to make money. Like, that's at the heart of this, which is when you're talking about a win-win, it's like, look, you have to find a way. Like, if there's a way that they can provide a fish ladder and do all these things under the strictest regulations, whatever this might be, and make a buck, like, God bless them, right? Because there's no world where we can just ditch the antimony.
And fulfill the needs of our nation.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and then when they get that antimony out, we got to figure out how to refine it. Where is that going to be in the United States? How do we do it? Can they do it economically? They'll figure it out. We need to have it, you know, cobalt, right? We have the Idaho cobalt mine, and it's been in and out of production. The governor went up there, cut a ribbon recently. Everything was great. All these folks came on, and then China flooded the market with cobalt, and they had to temporarily shut it down until prices come back such that they could make a profit.
When you, I didn't know that about China. When you talk about something like this, I didn't used to put two and two together, right? But cobalt being something we absolutely need, and get supplied largely from other places like China. Like, China owns or has the majority of the 30 of the 50 critical minerals that we need, right? Yep. They do not want that number to go down. They only want that number to go up. They want to have all 50 of the critical minerals, either the refining process or the contracts for them, whatever it might be. Even if they don't have them in China, they own the mines in Africa or wherever they're getting it from. And that's all part of this play. One of the big issues that has been explained to me, it's like, look, part of the tariffs that we're dealing with, the tariff wars with China, is that China has turned off the tap of some of these minerals, critical minerals in the United States. And we're using tariffs, not you and me, but the administration is using tariffs to get that supply reinstated. And in the meantime, the administration is also saying, hey, look, why are we even arguing with them? We have cobalt or we have antimony. Let's just go get that. And of course, then they can flood the market and make it not economically viable, because we live in a capitalistic system and they do not. So they can afford to take losses all day long if it's going to hamper our capitalistic companies from providing an alternate source. It's such a weird, twisted, like, international train wreck. And then you know, at the end of the day, most people are just like, well, I don't like mining.
Well, I mean, dude, we are on the precipice of sliding down into the Ted Hill show. You know,
The Ted Hill show.
he's absolutely right. There are things, I mean,
my
we have to consider about how do we get the things we need to sustain ourselves in the world, right? Where are the pinch points? Is it the transportation routes? Is it whatever, the sources of the minerals?
Sure.
I mean, dude, we've got to do a better job, and we've got to do everything we can to have a viable economy, and in my little neck of the woods, try to recover species or keep them from getting listed while doing that at the same time. And that's the hard conversations. You know, we in our office, we don't sit around in a suit and tie and just write emails and zap off a memo to, you know, some federal agency.
Sure.
No, man, we go out and we talk with the folks. I'm tired of going to STIB night and looking at the same thing, but it's necessary. We have to go out there and tour with, say, the Nez Perce tribe and tour the site with the regulatory agencies that issue these permits and understand the issues, right? We have to sit on the tailgates of trucks and talk with producers and what their challenges are on the landscape, maybe with bull trout or salmon and steelhead or getting their grazing permit or whatever. It's talking with all of the industry that's affected by the greater sage grouse listing. You know, how do we get phosphate out? How do we permit energy infrastructure? It doesn't matter what energy we're talking about. Last administration, it was all renewable. This administration, it's something else. It doesn't matter. It's still federal land, and these grouse occupy a lot of federal land. How do we work with everybody to achieve what society needs to achieve?
There was I believe it was Gretchen Hyde.
Yes.
From the Rangeland Resource Commission.
Yep.
She came in and was saying that there was a gentleman that made it his like life's mission to end ranching. Right. And he was using sage grouse as he was like, this is the answer to stop cattle grazing. And everybody like, wait, why are you stopping cattle grazing? And I don't know who the gentleman is. I, you know, really love to understand.
You haven't Googled it yet?
I did a quick Google and I was like, I don't know what, because there are a lot of people that make their living or, you know, stake their claim on, we're going to stop, you know, we don't like cattle. Right. There are plenty of people that do that. So I don't know who the exact guy is, but.
Well, he started Western Watersheds.
Okay, dude. Come on, hook it up. Let's have this guy on. But understanding that, it's like, okay, so there are people that even you'll go after sage grouse or you'll try to get sage grouse protected, not because you even care about sage grouse, but because it's a means to an end to stop this other thing from happening. Once I found that out, I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know who to trust anymore.
Yeah. And that goes back to the citizen suit provision. So Western Watersheds and its founder, I hesitate to name names on air, right? Because this lives forever.
Let's just say Western Watershed.
Yeah,
people
Western
can find it themselves.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. And their legal counsel was Advocates for the West, right? And Advocates for the West has very good lawyers, right? And so I started working for the state in 1994, and this was an issue. And at the time, I worked for the Department of Environmental Quality, and they have regulatory responsibilities, unlike the Office of Species Conservation. And so that group would bring suits under the Clean Water Act, which does not have a citizen suit provision, over decisions that EPA made based on, you know, information or reports or decisions made by the state, the boots on the ground, right?
Okay.
And so under the Clean Water Act, you can really only sue under the Administrative Procedures Act. And so the test there is, was this agency decision arbitrary and capricious, or is it supported by, you know, all the documentation? Can you link up the dots and rationally get to where they landed?
Right.
Well, they weren't successful there. And so then they moved on to the ESA because it was an easier target. And then they really started, maybe from their view, seeing some successes in limiting activities on the landscape or getting in the way and slowing everything down. But yeah, that's their model.
I have kind of, and this, I do not mean to put on a tinfoil hat here, but like I'm coming around to having a different view of people going after fundamental like society needs, right? Are we driving up cost of food? Are we decreasing our capacity to be self-reliant? Are we driving up the cost of electricity? Are we making like all of these basic things that we need? And when people engage in activities that decrease the capacity for farmers to farm or decrease the rangeland that we have available for ranchers, things like that, it's like, why? Right. And it's like, and I understand a lot of times there's a first layer or first level articulation. Like, we got to save the sage grouse. Like, okay, like I'm not against sage grouse, right? Like I like birds and my son really likes birds. Like, we had this great horned owl sitting on our fence the other day. I got a picture of it. It's pretty awesome. Anyway, the point is like, yeah, I like birds too, but I'm still on team human, right? And I'm on team like, not bad for human. Like, one of the great secrets of the United States is that we have accessible food, and whether or not the quality's high enough or red dye 40, whatever, fine, I don't care. But the point is like that is something that allowed us to become this economic giant throughout the world. And these types of things where it's like, okay, why are you doing this? Like, can you help me understand when you know this is going to be difficult for people, like actual everyday human beings like me going to the store trying to buy food for my family, and this is going to be costly to us. Why is that a good thing overall? And I'm like, I'm starting to get really weird. I'm like, are they foreign operatives?
Yeah, I don't know, man. And again, speaking to other groups' motives, I can't. I have to say,
right, of course,
it is. Yeah. And how do we negotiate that? How do we move forward? And there's a lot of conservation groups out there that are just wonderful to work with. Nature Conservancy, Trout Unlimited. I mean, there's folks that are putting their boots on the ground, rolling up their sleeves and getting stuff done in the name of conservation.
Yeah, the Henry Fork Foundation.
Absolutely. Rob Van Kirk and his organization, they pointed out a challenge to us with the level that they were drafting Palisades Reservoir down to. And if you draft that reservoir too low, you can get into accumulated sediments, and then they're discharging into a blue ribbon trout stream, excess sediment, which then can be a problem for spawning and whatnot later. But it was occurring during some of the lowest flows, so those sediments wouldn't flush out. But they brought it to our attention, and along with Idaho Fish and Game, we were able to sit down with Bureau of Reclamation and avoid that problem in the future.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
No, that's an example of a good way to do business. Not just fly off a lawsuit that may or may not win, but what you're doing there is it's your batting average. Oh, I'm going to file 1,000 lawsuits, and if I win 660, I'm doing a lot better than a batter, in MLB. We're making money net, so let's keep making money.
Yeah, I had Brandon Hoffner from the Henry Fork Foundation in months back during the legislative session. Really enjoyed talking to him, but the level of detail and pragmatic approach that he had and the organization has towards keeping that waterway accessible and multi-use. So it's like, yeah, we want to preserve fish. We want to have this accessible thing, but we also recognize this is used by a lot of different industries. So how can we all work together? It's like, God bless it, man. Like, that's an actual solution-based approach. And, again, it yields great results. Like, the Henry's Fork is world-renowned.
Absolutely. Finding collaborators, finding people that understand the issues, or more importantly, finding people that want to understand the issues. One thing we try to do in our office is understand the same issue from multiple perspectives. When I can make arguments from different stakeholders about the same issue, then I feel like I'm getting close to the place where I need to be, especially to move a collaborative process forward. Like, I kind of dropped this little statement earlier, and I said the Office of Species Conservation is non-regulatory. So, we do everything with people that are willing to work. We try to bring resources, knowledge, and expertise to a particular challenge to find a solution that's supported by the most possible
people,
the most diverse interest group. Yeah, exactly.
So and again, non-regulatory emphasizes you don't have the capacity to compel. Nope. They come forward and they're like, hey, how do we make this work? And you're like, all right, let's roll up our sleeves.
Yeah. If everybody tells us to go pound sand, then we have to find another place. And that is for a given species on a given landscape, that could be very detrimental to making progress in the future towards their recovery. So you got to understand the problems from everybody else's perspective and figure out how to navigate sometimes a very narrow pathway.
You mentioned the success of, or the should be articulated success of the wolverine.
Yeah.
Are there other species in Idaho that you guys have success stories with? I mean, grizzly bear is obviously a clear one. You've had not success in a population standpoint, right?
Yeah.
But like, it's not true that they're all just dying. Like, things aren't just constantly, well, excuse me, some things might be decreasing in population, but we also have increases of population.
Yeah. Unfortunately, by the time our office sees it, we don't have any real, I don't want to use the word jurisdiction, but we don't have any responsibility until a species becomes a candidate for listing or listed. But we have had a number of freshwater snails in the Snake River and springs associated with the Snake River come off the list. And we had some plants come off the list, while at the same time, we're looking at maybe a listing of monarch butterfly. That would be challenging. Pollinators generally, we have 3 or 4 pollinators right now. Those are the ones off the top of my head. We had woodland caribou, problem solved. They're all up in Canada now. They were actually as a conservation biology maneuver, they were taken up to a maternal pen out of Revelstoke, Canada. So they reproduce in this area, and more concentrated numbers. And I think maybe when things are more suitable, potentially they come back.
When you say pollinators, are you concerned about pollinators in Idaho? Like, I hear a lot of talk about, I mean, Idaho's obviously an agricultural center, right?
Yeah.
And I hear a lot of talk about like bee die off and things of that nature. Are you guys worried about this at all?
That's native pollinators.
Okay.
Yeah. So Western bumblebee, Suckley's bumblebee is a parasitic species that's reliant on Western bumblebees. And then we got the monarch. And, there's such challenging issues because they're, on the landscape. Well, first of all, they're small. I don't think anybody's actually found a Suckley's bumblebee in 20 something years. I have one picture of one. So maybe they're gone. Maybe we're just not looking in the right places for them. But I think they're, especially monarchs, they're just so challenging to work with.
Why is that? Just because they're delicate?
They're just everywhere, right? They're highly migratory, right? They go down to warmer climates for the winter, and then they come back up. I mean, how many monarchs have you found on the front of your vehicle?
I mean, yeah.
Okay. I mean, do you feel guilty? A little bit?
I mean, I feel bad about a lot more things than that.
Well, with that, it's like, what do they need? And in this case, what kind of plants are they relying upon? Are there enough plants? Do they have enough places to be? Are we using pesticides on the landscape that are detrimental to them? I don't know fundamentally what the root problem is yet, but what can we do? But can we do it proactively and have people be willing to do it and want to do it, and not have a hammer hanging over their hand or their head and saying, if you don't do this, whack. We don't want that. We want to figure out how to perpetuate the species and do so in like a willing seller, willing buyer manner, an open market manner. Right. I don't know what the solution is yet, but we got to figure it out.
Yeah. Well, Michael, listen, we've talked about way more species and situations than I anticipated today. This was fantastic. I would love to have you back on and keep going after this. I'd also, not asking you to take me to Stibnite Mine, but anytime you have a place where you're like, hey, if you want to see something that we're dealing with, get in my car, we're going this direction. Like, I'm there, man. Like, I want to go get boots on the ground.
Yeah, man, I'll give you a couple of pieces of low-hanging fruit. Next March, let's get you out on some sage-grouse let counts. We run some south of town. I understand you have 3 boys.
Yes, I do.
Well, I have 3 girls.
Look at that.
Mine are all off in college.
Unfortunate for my boys.
Yeah. But we can get them out there, get them up in the back of the truck with some binoculars and listen to them. I mean, they're really cool to see. They look like aliens. If you look really closely, you think their head will pop open and a little dude has levers like Men in Black or something. Yeah. But that's pretty awesome. Stibnite's some fairly low-hanging fruit. They do a lot of tours out there for a lot of reasons. And then come and look at some of the work we've done with the Simplot Corporation, Forest Service, and Trout Unlimited up on the Yankee Fork, along with the Shoshone-Bannock tribe. Yeah, that's a real interesting place. I think when everybody started working up the Yankee Fork, some of the historians, some of the people that really like mining, and they go up there because they want to see what a dredge is and what dredge piles look like and how did we extract gold. They thought we were going to come in there and ruin everything, as we're restoring the river for Chinook salmon and steelhead as well. And we'd been working up there for a couple of years, and, trucks would drive by and they'd kind of give you the stink eye. And we put up a couple of signs that talked about what we were doing, and they were defaced. And so one day we went up to the dredge and actually paid to do the tour. I kind of knew how a dredge worked, but I really wanted to see, because it's pretty impressive, honestly. And we're doing this tour, and they have this dredge mining association, and they're all volunteers. They go up there and man it all summer. And we actually had to, because we were changing some dredge piles, they were protected because they were greater than 50 years old. So here we're trying to fix the river that was manipulated by a dredge, and we actually had to pay some compensation, essentially, because we were moving some of those dredge piles. Well, anyway, we do this tour. We're in the middle of this tour, and they kind of realized who we were. And the reception was amazing. They just loved us. They refunded our money. They gave us a tour that was twice as long. They thanked them for some of the new canvas they got to cover the dredge and signage and stuff. It was a real good feel. It was a feel-good moment. Really was.
Man, that's great.
Yeah, check it out.
Yeah, man, let's do it. Listen, thank you for coming on. Thank you for making time, and we're going to do it again.
Thanks for the coffee. I'll come anytime.